If you are looking to discover a unique teaching method that engages students in your class, you're in the right place. During this session, I'm going to talk about an inventive approach to teaching leadership that steps away from the traditional lecture style method. My goal is to use this creative technique to inspire you to develop your own unique way of teaching students in order to enhance their learning. This experiential learning approach provides an opportunity for students to gain knowledge and skills in an interesting way. Through this process, students can improve their self-efficacy and learn a strategy to achieve their goals. Lessons about leadership are ubiquitous, and this innovative method capitalizes on the belief that leadership metaphors can be found everywhere we look. The current approach for a majority of faculty members is lecture-based learning, where over 50% utilize extensive lecturing as their primary approach. Policymakers, influential leaders, and researchers have stated the need for changes in approaches to undergraduate education in ways that promote meaningful learning, problem solving, and critical thinking for a diversity of students. Almost all full-time undergraduate teaching faculty agree that developing students' ability to think critically is a very important or essential goal. The new cube-solving strategy that I'm about to explain is an example of how educators can use a hands-on approach in order to teach problem-solving and critical thinking. This new experiential learning technique is an alternative method to lecturing that allows students to be active agents in their own learning process. In order to describe the innovative cube-solving strategy teaching method, I will be covering the background context of this method and how it was used in the classroom, intended learning outcomes, the design of the method and timeline throughout the semester, key findings observed over the 6-year use of this method, and suggestions on how you can discover your own metaphor to use that will help you engage your students and enhance their learning. Imagine you are a first-year student in a 3,000 level college student leadership development class. This is how your first day would have started. When I look at a Rubik's Cube, not only do I see a puzzle that has baffled millions of people for decades, but I also see a metaphor for leadership. And if you think about it, leadership is about solving large complex problems. And a Rubik's Cube is a large complex problem that a lot of people think is impossible for them to solve. But anyone can solve it, just like anyone can be a leader by gaining the knowledge, techniques, and skills needed to be successful. Your final exam for this class at the end of the semester will have 2 parts. First, you will solve a Rubik's Cube. Second, you will write a paper on how solving the Rubik's Cube is like leadership. I can see some of your eyes glazed over like a deer in headlights, but don't worry. I promise you, you can solve the cube. Every student before you has solved it in their hands during the final exam, even though many of them thought they wouldn't be able to do it. I encourage you to be patient with the process and trust that I will give you the education you need in order to achieve your goals. And then I handed them all a Rubik's Cube, and that began their learning process. Over the course of 15 weeks, I taught the students the technique for solving the cube along with leadership lessons that correlate with the cube. They were also broken into 6 small groups, and each group had a small group facilitator who was a former student of the class. The facilitators were there to help reinforce the leadership lessons taught in class and support the students outside of class time. I taught this course and used the Rubik's Cube as the final exam for 6 years. It started as a trial, but it was so successful that I kept doing it every year with some alterations each year based on the feedback from the students in order to make it better. In order to gauge the students' self-efficacy at the beginning of the semester, I would ask them who thought they would be able to achieve their goal of solving the cube by the end of the semester. On average, less than 50% of the students thought they would be able to do it. Every year, I always could count on at least one student asking, "But what if I can't solve it by the end of the semester?" My answer was always, That's not an option. Every one of you will be able to solve the cube by the end of the semester. But whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. When you doubt yourself, you limit your thinking, and limited thinking produces limited results. When we are trying to accomplish something great, we can't let ourselves have excuses. Questioning yourself and thinking you might not solve it is a mindset that will only hold you back. Leaders must believe in themselves and their abilities. I believe in you. Now I need you to believe in you. Right now, less than 5.8% of the world can solve a Rubik's Cube. However, I believe that anyone can solve the cube, just like anyone can be a leader and anyone can achieve their lofty goals by utilizing the cube solving strategy that I teach in this class. There were 4 main learning objectives of the cube solving strategy. I wanted students to discover and remember their 6 core values, which I equated to the 6 centerpieces on a Rubik's Cube that never move and help you orient yourself while solving the cube as the chaos of all the other pieces get put into place. I wanted students to increase their self-efficacy and believe in themselves to achieve their goals by believing that they could solve the cube. I wanted them to gain problem-solving skills by learning a method for solving the Rubik's Cube. And lastly, I wanted students to learn leadership skills such as time management, sacrifice, determination, and persistence. I wanted them to learn it through connecting how solving a Rubik's Cube is like leadership. The students were taught and tested on their ability to solve the cube in multiple stages over 15 weeks. On day 1, I introduced the Rubik's Cube's metaphor, the process, and the deadlines, along with the final exam expectations. I also handed out 1 Rubik's Cube to every student in the class. Teaching the cube was broken up into 3 layers. Just like any complex leadership problem, you don't solve it in one day. You solve it in layers over time, where one layer builds upon the last. During week 4, the students were taught how to solve layer 1 and learned leadership lessons that correlated with solving the cube, such as knowing their values. During week 7, students were tested on their ability to solve layer 1 and then taught how to solve layer 2. During this time, additional leadership analogies were taught as well. During week 9, students were tested on their ability to solve both layers 1 and 2, and then taught how to solve layer 3 while learning additional leadership lessons. During week 13, I conducted a focus group with the entire class to discuss the leadership lessons that they learned throughout the semester. I also used it to ensure that they were ready for the exam. At the end of the 15-week course, students solved the entire Rubik's Cube for the first part of their final exam. Several days after solving the cube, students submitted their final paper describing how solving the Rubik's Cube is like leadership. The paper was due later, so they could include their final exam cube solving experience in the paper. Beyond a few days of teaching, no additional time for practice was provided in class. Students spent varying amounts of time outside of class in order to learn the cube. They learned and practiced through 3 main pathways: individual, one-on-one, and group. Individually, students would utilize class materials and/or YouTube videos to learn and practice the cube solving technique. One-on-one learning occurred when students would partner up and learn from people who already knew how to solve the cube, such as a friend, an older student who already took the class, another student in the class who already knew how to solve the cube, myself, or their small group facilitator. In addition, group practice sessions were held. Sometimes they were initiated by the small group facilitator, but other times they were initiated by the students themselves as they wanted to rally together and help each other achieve their goals. There are 43 quintillion possible combinations for solving the Rubik's Cube, and there are numerous methods for solving it. Some students would learn ways to solve the cube that were different from what I was teaching in class, and that was embraced. Similarly to how there is not one right way to lead effectively, there are a plethora of good ways to solve the cube. Ultimately, the students were tested on their ability to solve the entire cube, not the method they used to solve it. I encouraged each of the students to discover the method that worked best for them and their way of thinking. Here are the key findings of using the cube solving strategy for teaching leadership. Over the course of 6 years, all 232 students in the classes solved the Rubik's Cube in their own hands during the final exam. Even students who thought solving the Rubik's Cube was impossible for them accomplished this goal, gained self-efficacy, and realized they could achieve other goals by using the lessons learned through the cube solving strategy. Students demonstrated through the final review conversation and their final papers that they gained knowledge and skills in all of the learning objectives. They discovered their core values and could recite them. Their self-efficacy improved, and they learned to believe in their abilities and potential. Students gained hands-on experience with problem solving and critical thinking by solving a large, complex problem and relating that experience to other problems they want to solve in life. The cube solving strategy helped the students gain leadership knowledge by learning about sacrifice, perseverance, strategizing, patience, teamwork, goal achievement, humility, self-discipline, and time management, among many other lessons. Ultimately, the approach provided students with a tangible representation of leadership that can help them visualize the intangible leadership skills. There were so many really amazing and inspirational outcomes. I wanted to provide a couple for you here. During class, I discovered that my student Tyler was colorblind, which was something that I didn't even think about while teaching. So it helped me grow as I learned how to be more inclusive. As soon as I found out that he was colorblind, I took a marker and I drew the letter of each color on each piece of the cube and gave it to him. Tyler solved the cube and learned to embrace his uniqueness. He didn't let his different ability get in the way of him reaching his goals. Tyler realized that he just needed a different resource to help him along the way. In addition, I later learned that they have Braille Rubik's Cubes for people who are visually impaired. Another student, Megan, wanted to quit class after day 1 because she didn't think that she would ever be able to solve the cube. Fortunately, Megan ended up staying in the class because her mom told her to not give up and to have patience with the process. Little did Megan know that her mom would find out later that semester that she had cancer. And now Megan was the one telling her mom to never give up. By the end of the semester, not only had Megan mastered solving the cube, but she was also helping other students learn how to solve it, all while supporting her mom on her cancer fighting journey. I'm happy to say that Megan's mom is in remission and doing very well. And through solving the cube, Megan learned that she's capable of more than she ever realized. Another student struggled with learning to solve the cube the entire semester. And she was the last person to finish solving the cube during her class's final exam. As she finished turning the final piece, the class erupted into cheers and clapping as she solved the cube with tears in her eyes. She said that she never believed in herself, and it felt so good to accomplish something that she thought was impossible. I'm so proud of all of my students for the time and effort that they put into achieving such a large, complex goal and for embracing the challenge to learn about leadership in a new, innovative way. So what's your metaphor? While I use the Rubik's Cube as a metaphor for leadership, I want to help you find a metaphor that works for you. I have a few suggestions that will help you discover your own experiential learning metaphor. First, use what you know. Use an example from a hobby or an interest of yours, something obscure and different that captures intrigue, but you also want to ensure that it is relatable to your audience. For instance, you may love to fly and have a private pilot's license. You may also teach people about public speaking. While these two things don't seem like they go together at first glance, you could use the metaphor of how a good speech is like flying a plane. You could discuss the importance of a smooth takeoff that lets your passengers know where you are taking them, a comfortable and pleasant flight that helps them enjoy the ride and build trust in you as their pilot, and a smooth landing at the intended destination on time or early that makes your passengers want to clap with appreciation. Talk about all of the elements that help create a smooth flight and connect it to effective public speaking. Use plain terminology and new information about flying that most people don't know, as it will help build the intrigue. Be aware of making connections constantly. I'm a firm believer that there are metaphors everywhere. You just have to be aware of the opportunity to find them. As I'm watching TV or movies, I'm constantly trying to make connection of what I'm watching to the subjects that I teach in order to create metaphors. Write them down as soon as you think about them so that you can come back to them later for deeper analysis. It takes time, so be patient with the process. You aren't necessarily going to find that perfect metaphor right away, but when you do, the analogies will just keep on rolling in. I only started with a few analogies with the Rubik's Cube in my first year of teaching it, but I added more and more as the years went on. And sometimes I thought about the new analogies, but many times it was my students who discovered the new connections and added to the learning. After you find your metaphor, there are a few things that you want to do in order to help the lessons stick with your students. Make it tangible. Take your metaphor and add something tangible that will allow your students to experience your lesson. Sticking with the flying metaphor, maybe have them build a paper airplane, have them decorate it, and on the different sections of the plane, have them write lessons they learned about public speaking. Tell them to be as creative as they want with their design. Do this, and I bet the next time they see a paper airplane, they will start to think about effective public speaking. Make it fun. A fun experience will make it more memorable for your students. One idea could be to make it a paper airplane competition with the class, where before each student throws their airplane to see how far it goes, they have to conduct a 30-second public speech to the class on why their plane best represents effective public speaking. Again, encourage them to be as creative as possible. In addition, you could do a competition at the beginning of the semester, maybe even the first day of class, to start it off fun. And then encourage them to create a plane at the end of the semester for a second competition to see if their plane improved and can fly further. You could even have an awards ceremony at the end of the semester where you give out awards for the farthest flying, most improved, best design, or even the you gave it your best shot for the least farthest flying plane. Maybe have the winner of each category give an acceptance speech, again tying the fun activity to your lesson of public speaking. Weave all of those lessons together. Find ways throughout the semester to relate your content to the metaphor and encourage your students to come up with new connections as well. Continually reference the metaphor. The more you mention it throughout the semester, the more students will remember it and embrace it. Thank you for spending time watching this presentation. I hope you learned a lot from the cube solving strategy and are inspired to create your own experiential learning metaphor. If you're interested in learning more or have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via the information on the screen. In addition, all of my contact information can be found on donovannichols.com. I'd love to work with you to develop your own creative new approach to teaching leadership.